Hey Poke people, got a little secret. I'm not playing BULU for NAIC. So it wasn't actually a complete ruse just because I was planning on playing BULU, and then I had kind of a sneaky thought last night. Thinking about all the Malamar that's in the meta right now, and just all of the abilities in general, I'm playing Weavile. Very sketchy and optimistic, I know, but let's go over the list. I figure at this point I'm not going to Worlds anyway. There's no way that I can really get my invite at this point, so I'm really just having fun. So here is the deck. I've been testing online, and trust me, it actually does. It puts in work. We've got a 4-4 line of Zoroark GX for solid, draw support and backup attacker. We have a 3-3 line of the Weavile with Evil Admonition. For 1 Darkness Energy, it does 50 damage times the number of your opponent's Pokemon in play, active and bench, that have abilities. So, something like a Malamar with like probably at least 2 Malamar and a Dawnwings active, probably a Lele. This kind of just one-shots anything for 1 energy. This deck pretty much just destroys Malamar. I've tried it against the different variants, both Ultra Necrozma and regular Necrozma, and it's beautiful. Especially regular Necrozma, because regular Necrozma has an ability as well that stops damage from normal Pokemon, so it's pretty rad. I've got 1 copy of the Resource Management Oranguru, just because you burn through stuff pretty quick, and I expect a lot of Garbodor as well. Can kind of help me get some of the item plays back into the deck, so I don't build up too much damage for them. Next we have a copy of Mew EX and a copy of Mewtwo. This is really just for the Buzzwole matchup. Also, there's a decent amount of Lucario, I think, in the format that I can expect, so that also is a little bit, it goes a little bit toward making that matchup a little bit better. Next we've got a copy of Tapu Koko. Really helps the numbers. Let's say that we're swinging for 200 for 4 ability Pokemon with Weavile. That's not enough to get knockout on a Zoroark, so really just doing 1 flying flip, sometimes 2, it just helps get the numbers really well. And I figured it was a good inclusion just as a free retreat Pokemon as well. 2 copies of Lele, pretty standard stuff. 4 copies of Ultra Ball and Puzzle of Time, like in any Zoroark deck. 3 copies of Field Blower, just because I expect to see a lot of Garbodor, and if I can stop their Garbotoxin from triggering, I can actually do a lot of damage with Weavile, because Garbodor's Garbotoxin, while it's active, it doesn't really count I think it just counts itself as for their abilities, because it turns off abilities, so it basically makes it to where abilities don't exist. But if I can Field Blower their Floatstone, Choice Band, whatever that's on the Garbotoxin Garbodor, then they have abilities again, and I can smash with Weavile. Also, I don't want my trades turned off if I can help it, so that's kind of the thought process there. 3 copies of Choice Band. It's not as big for Pokemon like Zoroark, who generally swing for 120. However, for Weavile, it really helps hit some numbers. If my opponent has 3 ability Pokemon out and I'm swinging for 150, Choice Band makes it 180, helps me get KOs against stuff like BULU and Necrozma GX and blah blah blah. Next we've got 2 Float Stones, just to be able to have some mobility with our Zoroarks. Zoroark doesn't really need the damage boost as much as Weavile does, so generally the Choice Band is the tool for Weavile, whereas the Floatstone is the tool for Zoroark, just depending on how the match is going and whatnot. 2 copies of Evosoda, pretty normal stuff for really Zoroark intense, decks, that kind of thing. That's pretty unusual. 1 copy of Mysterious Treasure, actually, just because I think this will help me with my Buzzwole matchup. As you can tell, this is a very dark, heavy deck. What I'm hoping that I can do to get an edge over Buzzwole is Weavile's a 1 prize attacker. Generally, Buzzwole has a lot of ability Pokemon on the bench, like Deontay, like Regirock, like Lycanroc, that Weavile can just use to beat up on my opponent. And then the Mysterious Treasure lets me get Lele's on demand, as well as the Mewtwo and the Mew. Basically just letting me get what I want when I want it. Just the one copy, because that's really all you need, I think. We've got 3 copies of N, 2 copies of Cynthia, 1 copy of, I was about to say Zorak, Professor Sycamore. Generally in Zorak decks, you run a little bit lower counts on the draw support, just because, I mean, Zorak is already a draw engine in itself, so that's the deal down there. 3 copies of Guzma, pretty standard. I kind of want to fit in a 4th, I'm just not sure what to take out at this point. I know I'm coming up with this deck like super last second, so unfortunately there's probably going to be some suboptimal choices here, which is kind of stressing me out, but like I said, just kind of going for fun, and yeah, that's that. Single copy of Mallow, single copy of Acerola, pretty standard for Zorak decks. 2 copies of Bridget, just so that it doesn't take up that much room in the deck. Normally I would like to run 3 in this deck. I actually can't find my other Bridget. But with the inclusion of the Mysterious Treasure, it just makes turn 1 Lele that much more accessible. Yeah, it's better to just play Bridget from your hand if you draw into it on turn 1, but even with 3 Bridget, that's not always super realistic, so I think I'm happy with the 2 copies. Last but not least, we have our energy. We've got 4 copies of DCE and 4 copies of Darkness Energy. So that pretty much is the list. I want to kind of take a moment, go over the top decks in the format right now for Standard, thanks to Limitless TCG, who keeps records of that. Not a sponsor. Talk to me. Call me. So let's head on over there and take a look at that.
So I did something pretty similar to this whenever I was getting ready to prep for Toronto. Toronto, I think I did a little more because I had the Road to El Toronto series. I couldn't think of a punny name, so I couldn't do that for Columbus. Actually, I've just been lazy lately. But I figured I would do another meta-analysis going into Columbus for the North American International Championships for Pokemon. Take a look at the top-ranked decks right now, the top 10. Talk about how Weavile kind of stacks up, I think, theoretically, against those decks. So without further ado, let's get started. Got my handy-dandy notes right here. So, Zorak is ranked number 1 for points right now. It's kind of lost the lead that it had a little bit before. It used to be pretty high above Buzzwole, but I think because, ever since Buzzwole got DNC Prism Star, it's just gotten that much better. Buzzwole is just in a really strong place right now, but Zorak is still number 1 for points within the last 3 months. So, definitely going to take a look at that. So there's 4 different variants that I'm kind of expecting at this point. There's the Lycanroc variant, which is probably going to be the one that I see the most. Garbodor variant is probably the second most common, and then there's the Golisopod and Lucario variant, both of which have seen a little bit of a backdrop in play. Probably Golisopod, I think, is still a little more common than Lucario, but anyway. So this is something of a mirror match for me because I'm playing Zorak Weavile. The good thing is that Zorak has Trade. Lycanroc has Bloodthirsty Eyes, but usually by the time that my opponent gets the Lycanroc out, I'm usually probably in trouble. Lycanroc, I think, is kind of a sketch match for me, just because it hits, it hits for weakness. It can, on demand, have my Zorarks up in the active for big hits and stuff like that, so I'm a little bit worried about Lycanroc. I know some Zorak Lycanroc decks play stuff like DNC, so I'm hoping that it won't be too hard to get those return knockouts. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Hopefully we can make that happen. If they have a Lele in play, a Lycanroc, and a DNC, Weavile swinging for 150, 180 with the Choice Band, and then if I've done my Flying Flip with Coco, that's within range. So I'm hoping I can get those revenge KOs. I think Coco is just going to be really important for a lot of the map throughout the series. As for Zorak Garbodor, it's a little bit 50-50, I think. I don't know. I actually kind of have this down as a favorable matchup just because I run such a high count of Field Blower, and I have the puzzles to be able to get the Field Blowers back, and the Ringaroo to get the Field Blowers back. So long as I can keep items off of the Garbodor, they will have a lot of abilities live, and they won't be able to lock off my trades. So for me, I kind of see that as more of a favorable matchup. Doesn't take much to hit for big numbers with Weavile, especially if they got, you know, 2 Zoroarks out, a Lele, and a Garbodor. I mean, that's 200 right there. If I have a choice ban, or if I flying flipped with Coco already, that's knockout, no problem at all. Golisopod, I think, is also favorable just because they're probably going to have 2 or 3 Zoroarks out again, probably a Lele. Just the fact that I can do a lot of heavy damage with a 1 prize attacker, whereas Zoroark is kind of a lower damage deck, just for consistency. I think that gives me a little bit of an advantage there. Against Lucario, I think it's a little more 50-50. It gets a little bit sketchier than I think Golisopod and Garbodor do, mostly just because Lucario can really hit the numbers easily against Zoroark. Lucario doesn't have any abilities. Hopefully, if they have Deontay Prism Star, that'll give me a little bit of a damage boost alongside the Zoroarks. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Lucario, I'm just not too sure. I can have those Psychic Pokemon on demand pretty well with, you know, the Ultra Balls obviously, and then the Mysterious Treasure and things like that. So I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. I should be able to get those return KOs, but I don't know. I think it's just going to be a question of who sets up faster. If I just flounder around, I think I'm just dead in the water. That's probably true of anything, though. All right, moving on to the number 2 deck list right now. Once again, I think I mentioned this before. This is the top 10 decks right now as far as points go on LimitlessTCG.com. Looking at the past 3 months of Standard. So Buzzwole Lycanroc, I think, is pretty sketch. Obviously, I'm playing a dark deck. Like I said, like most fighting decks, I mean, this is going to play a decent amount of abilities. I imagine we'll see maybe Octillery. I think we'll see, you know, Lycanroc has an ability, Deontay has an ability. If we see Lele's, that would be good. They probably won't play Lele's unless they're really desperate, just because they obviously see what I'm doing. But also I can get those the Mew and the Mewtwo on demand pretty quickly too, so I'm kind of hoping that this is a 50-50 matchup, but realistically I kind of have it down as a sketch, because I'm not sure. Garbodor, I think it's a little more favorable. I marked this down as being either favorable or 50-50. I'm not too sure. Just because, like I said, if I can keep consistently field blowing their items off of their Garbodors, that's a lot of abilities that are going to be out for me to be able to get those big swing turns and whatnot. So that's kind of where my head is for Buzzwole. I am obviously scared of it. I play the dark deck. I'm playing a Zoroark. Zoroark decks in general don't tend to do too well against Buzzwole. Usually it's 50-50 at best, but yeah, I think at this point I'm really just going to have to rely on those field blowers, and hopefully my opponent will play a lot of ability Pokemon down. They probably won't. I think probably some of the stronger Buzzrock players are going to notice obviously that they don't want to play down a lot of abilities, and they can kind of get away with that too. Buzzwole hits so hard, especially since it almost doesn't really need boost against my deck. It kind of one-shots everything anyway. Gets the knockout on Zoroark really easily with Absorption and Knuckle Impact. Jet Punch does a lot of damage to Weavile. If it has just the Deontay out, that's already a knockout. That's kind of a pain. So I don't know. We'll just have to see. I think it's going to depend on how desperate the Buzzwole player gets, because if they really need resources, then they're going to have to play down the Octillery. They're going to have to play down the Lele. Yeah, so I think it's... I don't know. I think I'm going to call it 50-50 because I'm feeling optimistic, but I think that's best case scenario. Alright, Malamar. This is new to the meta since we went to Toronto. This obviously wasn't in my Toronto analysis. If you've been playing a lot lately, you know that Malamar is kind of everywhere at a lot of the cups and the challenges that I've been going to lately with Forbidden Light. Almost everybody has been playing Malamar. It's a really fun deck. It's a really unique deck, I think, and the Psychic typing is just really strong right now. Also, it's pretty good to just be a dragon because there's not really that much fairy in the meta, so Ultra Necrozma really doesn't have to worry about that much. Basically, though, I'm hoping to see a lot of Malamar. That's probably obvious. Malamar runs a huge amount of abilities, and I've done testing with both brands of Malamar online and with friends, and it stomps. It really, really stomps. It's ugly. So what I'm hoping for this tournament, for the most part, is to mostly go against Malamar decks and then kind of ride into day 2. Maybe we can get that day 2 this time. We'll see what happens. If I go up against just a bunch of Buzzwole decks, gets a little sketchier. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to say here. Necrozma, I think, is the more favorable matchup over Ultra Necrozma, just because Necrozma GX actually does have an ability, whereas Ultra Necrozma does not. Either way, I mean, they've got a... Most Malamar decks have to play like 2 Malamars. And then they usually have a Dawn Wings, that's already 150. If I flying flip and have a choice band on my Weavile, it's really just not hard to hit the numbers. So this is kind of like the super favorable matchup. Malamar's popularity is honestly why I'm playing Weavile for this event. I really was considering BULU up until last night, and then I went crazy, did a whole bunch of testing, and realized that Weavile might actually be a really good play right now, and I don't think a lot of people are expecting it. That's also why I'm uploading this so late before time for us to leave for NAIC. I don't want people to really see this coming. Not that anyone watches my channel, I mean, but just to be on the safe side. Alright, the newly number 4 Tapu BULU. In the past, BULU has been a solid 3 on the top deck scale, so it's interesting to see it take a little bit of a back seat. I think that BULU is a strong play at the moment, just because I think it's pretty 50-50 with Malamar. I think it's decently favorable against Buzzwole. It's just all around a really good deck, to be honest with you. I really enjoy BULU, but the problem with BULU is that I don't know how many abilities to expect. Like, I could probably expect a Lele to be out, you know, Vikavolt. Maybe they'll get 2 Vikavolts out. I don't know. I feel like hoping for 3 ability Pokemon is a little bit optimistic. 3 ability Pokemon is kind of the magic number to get knockouts against BULU, because that's 150, and then Choice Band makes 180 for Weavile. But we'll see how it goes. Yeah, because doing partial damage against BULU with BULU's GX move is just not good. Tapu Wilderness GX that heals off all the damage and gets a knockout on the same turn. So if you can't knock out BULU in one shot, it's almost not worth hitting. So, I don't know. That's always been a little sketchy with Zoroark decks in general, but I hope that Weavile has a high enough damage ceiling to where BULU won't be a problem. I would say at this point, it's pretty sketch. Maybe 50-50 if I'm being optimistic, but overall I think it's kind of a sketch matchup. Now we've got everybody's favorite trash bag. We've got Garbodor. We kind of talked about this a little bit with Zoroark and with Buzzwole, but Garbodor Espeon is just such a force in itself. It's number 5 right now on rankings. Really, it's Garbodor, Espeon, Drampa, pretty much. Tauros. The thing about it that's a problem is that the Trash Lance Garbodor does not have an ability, Espeon does not have an ability, Tauros does not have an ability, nor does Drampa. So I'm a little bit worried about this. If I can't reliably get my field blowers, I think this is going to be rough. But on the upside, my Pokemon have a Psychic Resistance, and generally they only run on 1 energy attachment, so Espeon can't really hurt them that much. If I'm careful about my items, then Trash Lance can't really hurt me that much. I don't know how I'm going to get that one shot on Tauros. You have to get the one shot on Tauros. That's the end of story. So I don't know. I'm honestly kind of spooked over this. It's going to be sketchy. I have it down as a 50-50. Just because if I can get those field blowers, and you know, they have like a Garbodor and a Lele up or something like that, that's kind of decent. I mean, that's 100, that's not bad for swinging with 1 prize attacker for 1 energy. So I don't know, I think I'm gonna have to rely a lot on the resistance here and hopefully be able to get rid of the Potowns as they come down, because that's gonna be a big pain too. Next up is our favorite frog, Greninja, not the GX, unfortunately. I really haven't seen much play for the GX outside of PTCGO, with people just goofing off and myself just goofing off with it. I really like Greninja GX, but I just don't expect to see it much at this tournament. If I do see it, it's probably going to be the list with Latios. In general, Greninja GX 100% does not scare me. Abilities for days, you know. Greninja GX is not a threat. But we're not talking about Greninja GX. We are talking about regular Greninja, which I think is pretty sketch. So my choice bands don't work against this thing. It has 130 HP, which is a lot worse for me than 120, because with 120, I can Coco Flying flip once, and then they just have to have 2 ability Pokemon out, and then I can get a knockout. 130 is pretty bulky against Weavile, and I mean, they run Starmie, and then the Greninja Breaks have abilities, so yeah, there's stuff going on, but by that time, they're turning off my trades. So it's really just a race to see who sets up first. I think if I can set up pretty quick, Greninja won't be a problem, but if I kind of flounder around in the first couple turns, I think I'm just going to have to scoop it, move to the next game, and should really just hope and pray. I'm not sure about this matchup. I really have to think about it. Right now I have it down as 50-50, just because I think both are kind of equally threatening to each other, you know? We'll see how it goes. Those water shurikens are going to hurt, though. And the ability to lock is rough with Shadow Stitching, so we'll see. The good thing is Shadow Stitching doesn't turn off their abilities, so Weavile can still hit for a lot of damage. So if they get rolling and they have their board state kind of all set up, then also it's probably not too much of a problem. Maybe this is a favorable matchup and I'm just being a little spooked. I'm not too sure. I think 50-50 is the best optimistic estimate. So next up is a deck that I did not expect. It is Zygarde GX. As you guys may know, I've been playing around with Zygarde a decent amount, and so I was pretty surprised and kind of happy to see it listed on Limitless TCG as I think the number 7. Number 7 deck on Limitless TCG. I was curious, so I looked up a lot of the lists, and the lists that have been doing really well lately actually don't run Bonnie. And so that really confused me. But then once you factor in Dianthi Prism Star, Strong Energies, and things like that, I mean, and Regirocks, like, you can ramp up the damage on this thing pretty quick. It doesn't have the issue that Buzzwole has, to where once it swings, it can't attack next turn. Verdict GX is still usable without Bonnie, you just have to time it well, and Cell Connector really helps to accelerate those energies. I don't know how I feel about it being a part of the meta. Like, I love Zygarde GX, trust me, but I just don't... I'm not worried about it, I guess is what I'm getting at. The HP is really high for a basic GX, but Zygarde is going to be playing so many ability Pokemon that I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem. Zygarde does play Lycanroc GX, so that might be a little bit of a threat because they can just call up my Zoroarks and get big knockouts there. But yeah, Verdict GX doesn't affect me that much because if they have a lot of abilities up, which they generally will, Weavile can still hit it after Verdict GX. So it's really not a big deal for me. So I don't know. Overall, even though this is a fighting Pokemon that can easily one-shot everything in my deck, I feel like I'm winning the prize trade because I can pretty easily one-shot trade back with one prize attackers. So I feel okay about this. This is probably, out of all of the matchups on this list, aside from Malamar maybe, this is probably the most favorable. I'm really not worried about it. I am actually thinking about playing Mystery Inside events though, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, number 8, we've got Golisopod Garbodor. Gollygarb is still a thing. It has survived since Worlds of last year, kind of in the background. I haven't really see too much play outside of when Mike would bring it to like locals and stuff. First impression is pretty brutal. It easily takes out a Weavile. Armor Press is really problematic for me because that also takes out a Weavile. And the, I don't know, the Golisopods, they don't have an ability. The Wimpods do though. So I'm hoping that maybe if our opponent is relying on some Acerola plays to be able to just pick up those Golisopods, they're generally going to have a probably a Wimpod out on their bench, so that's one ability Pokemon, and then the Garbs are also ability Pokemon. So this is another matchup where I'm just going to really have to watch my items. A little bit less than most people do, again, because of that Psychic Resistance, but it still gets a little bit spooky. I'm thinking that... I mean, this is also a deck that pretty regularly runs Lele, so I don't know. With that, the token Wimpod on the bench, Garbodor, Garbotoxin, I'm actually not super worried about this. I think it's pretty 50-50, maybe a little bit more on the favorable side if I had to guess. So that's kind of where my head is at with Philistopod. Number 9 on the list is Magnezone, and I'm kind of surprised this is still this high. Magnezone Duskmane is a pretty solid deck. I kind of haven't seen it lately. I saw it a lot at Toronto, and then after that, like in locals and stuff, I don't really see anyone playing it. Zach's tired of it, so he doesn't want to play it anymore. He hasn't quit it because he thinks it's bad. He just is bored of it. So I really haven't seen this deck in a while. Good thing is Lele's magnetic circuit. In general, I can hit this deck pretty dang hard. I'm not super worried about it. They have to discard so many resources, and for the most part my deck is one prize attackers. I mean, there are the Zoroarks, but generally the Zoroarks aren't going to be my main aggressive Pokemon. I'm mostly going to be going at my opponent with the Weaviles, you know, chaining them back in with puzzles and things like that. So I don't know, overall I'm not really that worried about Duskmane. Last but not least, at number 10 right now is actually Lapras. I don't really know what to say. I mean, it's favorable. Just because, you know, Lapras doesn't have an ability, but it runs Volcanion Prism Star. Sometimes they still run Manaphy, but a lot of people don't. I mean, Octillery, there's a lot of abilities here, and I'm really just not worried about it, you know. I thought about tucking in a Shaman actually for the Flippity Flap or whatever, the counter, whatever with the counter energy, but I just don't see many of the grass weak decks as a threat. I don't really see Lapras as a threat to my deck right now. I don't see Zygarde as a threat to my deck right now, so in general, I'm really not worried about Lapras. I'm honestly not expecting to see it. I think I'll see it like next to me and adjacent around me every once in a while, but I don't think I'll probably verse it. Maybe once, if that, probably not. So, alright everyone, those are my thoughts on the NAIC coming up this weekend. I'm super scared. I'm gonna try to get this up probably Thursday morning, maybe Wednesday night. Right now it's kind of Wednesday midday. I want to kind of put it off for last second just because I don't want this to go live super early again, just because I don't think anyone is thinking about Weavile right now, and I think it's a solid play. So I'm hoping to kind of surprise some people. If I don't do well with it, you know, I don't do well. It's not a big deal. Like I said, at this point I am not getting my World's invite, so it really doesn't matter how well I do. At Toronto, even when I wasn't doing so well, I was still having fun. I ended up doing pretty decently because I cleaned up at the bottom tables. I ended up going 4-4-1 if you guys remember. But, I mean, even if I do worse than that, I don't really care. It's a good time. The vendors are always really cool. I like the side events. I just get really into everything. So I'm really pumped. I'm really pumped to see what does well. There's a lot more big YouTubers and stuff that I haven't met before that are going to be there. There's YouTubers that I have met that I want to meet, that I just want to go annoy, so that'll be pretty cool. And who knows, maybe one of these days someone will actually be like, oh my god, it's Riley the Rat. Probably not, but I can dream. Anyway, alright, see you guys there. Boop.